Hello, hello, and welcome
Hello.
back. We are here with the Sure Parenting podcast. If you are seeing our faces, you're probably on YouTube or Facebook. If you are just listening to our voices, you're listening to the podcast. And if you want to see our faces, head over to Facebook or YouTube. Both channels are called Sure Parenting. So today we have an amazing guest who is going to share her story that just blows my mind and gives me so much hope and peace and joy. And also, I've shed a couple tears because it's a big one. But there's really the goal here is to inspire and to offer hope for those who are in the trenches right now. So if you would love to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your family, whatever you're comfortable sharing, and maybe your overarching message, and then we'll get into the details.
Okay. Yeah. So my name's Alishia Devey. I am a mom of, we're a blended family. So I have two daughters of my own, and then I have a stepdaughter, and then we have a baby boy. Well, he's 2, so not really a baby anymore, that we had together. And it's been about 3 years now that we discovered, my daughters told me that they were being abused at their dad's house. We had 50-50 custody at the time. And so this is just kind of the journey that we've been through and how we've gone through the healing process and how we have really just turned the story around and gone from victimhood into the victors of this whole process. And so yeah.
I'm so grateful that you're here to talk with us today. And so this story obviously involves children going through something pretty horrendous, atrocious, horrible, any adjective you'd like to use. So if this is a sensitive topic for you, please do not feel bad about just clicking off. You don't have to listen to things that are not good for your mental health. But the message is about that hope and healing. So if you feel like sticking around, we would love to have you. So your daughters came to you and they told you this really devastating news. I know from talking to a lot of parents who have been in that spot where their kid tells them something that one of the first things that moms can feel is just shame. Did that happen for you? And if so, how did you hold that while also being there for your girls?
Yeah, absolutely. My oldest daughter is the one that told me first about the abuse that was happening. And it was the shame, I think, maybe came a little bit later. Initially, it was shock. I went into shock. I always say, just like looking back on the experience, it almost felt like my soul left my body just because of the details and the extents of the abuse that they had endured. And so the shame came a little bit later, and I recognized it when I started blaming myself and saying, I wish I did this and I should have done that, and having those kind of conversations. And the should have is never a healthy phrase to say in general. But yeah, absolutely. It was, for a while, I took the blame on myself. And it's just been through this process of, it's been about 3 years now that I'm now getting to a point where I'm like, you know what? I did everything I could. Mm-hmm. And even though I couldn't stop the abuse because I physically wasn't there, so there wasn't anything I could do when it happened, what was important is what I did when they told me about it. And that's when I stepped into action. And that's when I called the police. And that's when we got into therapy and DCFS and all those things. So even though it's horrific and it's so heartbreaking what they went through, what's been the most important thing now is how I've handled it now. And that's, like I said, just stepping into action.
I completely agree. I think it makes sense that we go to shame because it's a form of bargaining in that grief process. We're like, okay, but if I can find a way to make it my fault and put it all on me and take all the responsibility, then I can fix it. Like, that's really what's underneath that. And the truth is, we can't control other humans. And if somebody else does something terrible, they made that choice.
Yeah.
And you're right to focus on, as soon as this became something you were aware of, you jumped into action. Yeah. You did not hesitate. And I know in conversations we've had, that's something that you've keyed in on as one of the most important things for parents to do for their children, is that if they tell you something, believe them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. To just listen to your kids, to actively listen to your kids when they're trying to tell you something. Put the phone away, step away from the computer, turn the TV off, whatever distraction there might be, and to actively listen to your kids. And I mean, obviously this was a very extreme thing that happened to them, but it can be something a little bit less of like a bully at school, or maybe even like little kids, maybe they believe there's a monster in the closet underneath your bed, and it's just believing them because that is their truth. That is what is happening in their world. That is what they are experiencing in their little lives. And so just actively listening to them and believing them, and then getting them the help they need after they've talked to you about that. And that is one of the most powerful phrases I have said with my daughters is, I believe you. I believe you.
Absolutely. And in my coaching, I often have this double balance scale of I believe you and I believe in you. And, to be clear, you as an adult don't have to believe that there is a monster. You have to believe that your child is experiencing some kind of fear in that moment. And the way that they can conceptualize that is monster. Right. And so the believing of them is their emotional experience, their interpretation of events. That's what's true for them. And you can believe in them that they can be armored with tools or resources or strategies to get through that thing. And then in the case of, that's the little stuff, right? And then as you move up, then there might be other professionals that need to come in. There might be police that need to come in. And there was in this case. And that is all part of, I believe you. And I believe you so much that I will stand in front of you and speak to these adults who can help us. And I will be your advocate, and I will present your experience to these other people so that they believe you too. Yeah. I think that that's really valuable.
Yeah, exactly. Because you are your kid's advocate. And a lot of times they don't have the words like we do as adults to express what's going on. And so you, in a sense, become their voice, and you are that advocate, and you are, as the adult, it's your duty and responsibility as a parent to seek out the things that may, the different routes that you may need to go down to help them. Yeah. Absolutely.
Did you have any fear in yourself of being believed when you're going to call, I think in your state it's DCFS, but in some places it's CPS. When you're going to make those calls or talk to the police, did you have any fear that they wouldn't believe you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's always that fear that they may not believe the story, and then that's it. Like, unfortunately, it does get to a point where these authorities do have some say over your children's lives. And so there were times where I was scared that they wouldn't believe me or wouldn't believe my daughters, but I had to just have that faith that they would, and that they would get us the help that we needed. And that is what happened. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. But it was for us. They did believe it. And after we had the interviews and talked with the police and things like that, it was enough for them to say, okay, we're going to open up a case and we are going to take this to court.
Excellent. I'm very glad that there's charges pressed. That's the most I can say publicly.
Yeah.
So we talked about, for the girls, for believing them, did they ever, feel pressure or have the opportunity to feel pressure from the other party to change their story or to not believe themselves?
Yeah, they did.
And they stuck to their stories.
Yeah. They, the abuse went on for over a year before they actually told me what was happening. And looking back, there were a lot of times where they were being influenced by the other person and like, oh, don't say that. Oh, be quiet. Hush, hush. And so that just added to some of my suspicions of, you have your mother's intuition, right? I knew something was happening, and I could tell because of their emotional and behavioral, like drastic emotional changes that they experienced. And then when they were having parent time with their biological father, they were just different. They were just so different. And so it just added to the story of like, something is happening, but I had to wait for them to tell me.
Yeah.
And it had to come from them.
Right. Because you can't plant stories in them either.
No.
Oh, it's so hard to be in, that's where that shame comes up of like, oh my gosh, this went on so long and I didn't know, and I knew something, but I didn't know it was this. And that feeling of shoulda, woulda, coulda, if I could, if all of that is really intense. And just like you said, being able to take that and sure, it's fair to feel those things, especially as a parent. You're mama bear, you want to protect your kids, you want to make nothing ever bad happen to them. And at the same time, when bad things happen, because it is life and things will happen, hopefully never this, but something.
Right.
And you have this opportunity to show up for your child and to show up with them. And I think if you are stuck too far in your shame, you really can't then show up for them.
Yes.
You're too kind of buried in the guilt of it to be able to think clearly and to move forward the way that you did.
Yeah. It's finding a balance of acknowledging your own feelings and your own shame and guilt and anger and hurt and all the things, but also you can't drown in those emotions. Yes, you can feel them, but you have to give yourself grace to move through them quickly so that you can do what needs to be done. And only that's what healing is, right? I mean, no one wants to stay in shame and guilt and hurt and anger forever. Hopefully we can move through it so we can get to the point, like I said, where we are in that victor stance, where we are healing and we are creating the new memories and all of that.
Yeah. And I want to note for viewers on this topic, it's very, very valuable to teach your children the words of their body parts.
Absolutely.
We really, really push not using, cutesy phrases like cookie. I taught a program years back to first graders, and that was part of it. In the training for that, it was this story where the girl kept telling her mom that her uncle kept touching her cookie. And the first 5 times she told this story, it was like, okay,
right,
share your cookie. Like it didn't connect for her until she kept repeating the story. And then she was like, wait a minute, you're what? Like but there was this shame and discomfort with human body parts. And so she didn't have the language to say vulva or vagina, and then it becomes harder to prove in court.
Yes.
So, parents don't like to hear that. That can never happen. I don't want to put that out there. We're not talking about putting anything out there. We're talking about, this is your body. These are what all your body parts are. Yeah. It's just giving them the language to speak about their own body. And for many children, being able to say firmly to a babysitter, do not touch my vagina. It shocks them so much that they're like, oh crap, this kid knows. Like it can have a protective effect there too.
Yes.
And it's just something that anytime we're having this conversation, I want to make sure is put out there for parents that are like, I don't know what to do. Start with conversations, start with real names. This is an elbow. If we can say elbow, we can say penis. Like these are just body parts. Facebook might disagree, and who knows? They'll mute us.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And that is something from the very beginning that I taught my daughters is this is your body. This is anatomical terminology. They use it in colleges. They use it in, and I'm a massage therapist. So I did have a lot of anatomy in my schooling. And so it is just part of our language because you have a vagina, you have a vulva, and so it did add. So when my daughter first reported me to what was happening, she told me exactly what happened to her. And she was able to because she knew the anatomical terminology. And so when she had her interview with DCFS, she said those words. And so they were able to get so much information from her report that it really has strengthened this whole entire court case because she knows her body.
And I get chills, and there's such a combination of feelings of gratitude and then just horror at the same time that this little girl had to tell this story. But how empowering to be able to sit across the table from an adult and say, no, this is what happened. And to know in your bones, this is your truth and people are listening to you. Oh, these girls, I'm so glad they have you. So moving from this initial piece and the things that we can do there, if your kid ever comes to you and it's like this terrible thing happens and there's the I believe you and I believe in you, now we need to figure out what's the next steps. How did you said you called the cops and DCFS, and at some point there was the decision to go pursue therapy, correct?
Yes. So We called the cops, and the cops, how the process went, they're the ones that actually called DCFS, and then they set up the appointment, and we went to, it's called the Children's Justice Center.
Okay.
And so we went there, and they had a police officer, they had social workers, they had CPS, and that's where they did their initial interview. And my oldest daughter, they did decide to do a medical exam with her. However, my youngest daughter, they did not.
Okay.
They figured at the time she was just too young. They didn't want to have her go through that. But I will say the way
traumatizing in and of itself.
Yes, but they're also very respectful. The way they did the medical exam, they have professional nurses come in and do it, and they were very respectful about it. And I was in the room with her for the medical exam part of it. So I'm grateful that they have that understanding. And really, if I didn't have the support of those authorities, and if I didn't have the support of my family and my husband now, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I wouldn't have. And so there was a lot of courage for myself as well to call the cops.
Yeah.
And to go through this process, because I knew that's what had to happen.
Yeah. And there's like you mentioned, the shock. Part of shock can become denial. Like, no, this can't be real. This can't. No, this can't be real. And having to get through that to go, I have to do something I never imagined I would have to do.
Right.
And I don't know how much of your story you're comfortable sharing, but it's not like you and this guy were happily married previously.
No.
So there's like another layer of putting yourself in harm's way.
Yes.
Because the harm to your child has to stop.
Yes. And that's when that mama bear energy comes in. That's where it never was a question in my mind of should I? It was, okay, this is what I have to do for my daughters, because if not me, who? Mm-hmm. If not the parent, if not the mother, the supportive, loving adult in their family, then who? Who's going to protect them? Mm-hmm. And we've kind of talked before too. It happens. It happens a lot where the kids report the abuse to an adult and they don't believe them.
And it's devastating, because I talk to those adults 30 years later, 20 years later, and they're like, yeah, this happened for 12 years and nobody believed me. I told my mom and she told me I was ridiculous. Yep. And I think very few of those women who don't believe their children actually don't believe them. I think that they are so desperate for it to not be true. Yeah. That they choose that story over facing the reality. And reality always wins eventually. Yeah. I think that's the thing. And so you had the presence of mind, and I think you like touched on it and moved on real quick, but I think a really important factor is surrounding yourself with support. Yes. Like, you have to put your own pillars of strength around you, because this is a heavy burden to carry. Absolutely. And so having that with you to go, okay, I'm going to go into the fire. I'm going to, go into this battle. Yeah. And come what may, my daughters will know that I did absolutely everything I could for them. And in this case, thank God, charges are pressed and he's going to go to jail, and like, oh, thank goodness, because that's part of their story. And you said something else, the phrasing was really great. You said, if not me, who else? If not that their loving, trusted adult. And the reason I love that so much is because when you do CPTSD research, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, often because of ongoing childhood abuse, the differentiation between somebody who actually develops CPTSD and somebody who experiences a trauma but then doesn't develop CPTSD is often one single supportive adult who says, I believe you. I believe in you, and I will hold hands with you or link arms with you, and we will get through this. I will not let you face this alone. Yeah.
And I've said those things to my daughters, and I've told them, from the very beginning, thank you too for having the courage and for being brave to tell me what was happening. That's scary. They don't understand it. They're so young still. They don't understand what actually happened to them. They just understand, my bio dad hurt me. They don't understand the depth of it. But to have someone, me and their stepdad and their grandparents on both sides, aunts and uncles, they have had such a strong support system of these loving adults that have all said, we love you, we believe you, and we're here for you. And we're going to go in this battle together. And I do want to touch, because I'm sure there are maybe some listeners that feel like they don't have that family support system.
Mhm.
And so there was a point in time before all of this happened that I was living about 4 hours or so away from my family, and there were some things going on. And at that point, I had to call the police again because of what he was doing. And so then I ended up going to a women's shelter. And my daughters and I, we spent the night at a women's shelter. And that was another very surreal moment in our lives. But at that women's shelter, they were some of the kindest people I have ever met. They supported us in so many ways. They, we had a safe place to spend the night that we needed it. And they gave us food vouchers, and they had people that played with their kids while they were, the police were talking to me. And so if there is someone who feels like they don't have that family support, go seek the support, because it is out there.
Yeah,
it is out there. There's the police, there's the DCFS, CPS, the Children's Justice Center, which it might be called different things in different states, but there's women's shelters everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's what they want to do. They want to help you.
They do. And I think that you have to know that an abuser will try to lie to you. They will say things to you like, no one will ever believe you. Who would believe you? They'll say things, and it gets in your head when you're told the same lie over and over and over and over and over again for years and years and years and years. You start to believe it. That is how abuse continues for so long. And I'm not telling you to try to erase that voice entirely, because that takes years, if ever.
Absolutely.
But to put it in this box and then open this box and hear Alishia telling you, just call the shelter. Yeah. Let somebody else be a voice in your ear. Yeah. See what's available to you. Yeah. We have some comments. Alishia's story is so inspiring. Alicia is so brave. Alicia's story is amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
True, you're incredible. And I know that it takes so much courage to speak on such a heavy topic, and to do so delicately. You'll notice we are not using anybody's names in this story. That's not appropriate. But you have really taken something that could become the defining, crushing blow in your life. And you've used it as a springboard. So let's shift into, what did healing look like for you? Were there steps, stages? Was it kind of whoopie? Like,
yes. I mean, we all know healing's not linear. It's in no way linear. It's like, and it was a mess. To be honest, it was a mess for a while. All of us were in this trauma. All of us. I had my trauma I was dealing with. My daughters had their trauma they were dealing with. My husband now, so their stepdad, he had his own set of trauma he was dealing with. So it was hard for a long time. And I gave birth to my baby at some point with all of that too. It was right after my daughter told me. So we were just in the thick of it.
Oh, I don't think I realized that's how much the stories overlapped.
Yeah.
Wow. So you got pregnant not knowing.
Yeah, so my son was born a couple weeks after the initial report, and he was actually born early because my body just couldn't handle it anymore. You
were pregnant when she told you.
Yes. Yeah, it was a lot.
Oh my. You and I, we need to have a conversation with Paige Delgado. That's a different thing.
Yes.
We need to have that three-way conversation. Okay. She's doing some really, really tremendously incredible work with birth and imprinting and things that happen during pregnancy and delivery, and like using body work to clear those things. Yeah. So like, I didn't realize that overlap. That's a different story. We won't get sidetracked. Squirrel brain, stay put. Stay.
But it was messy. It was hard for a really long time. And for a long time, I was so focused on their therapy and getting the help they needed, because I had to, and not in any way of saying like I'm upset about it or anything like that. Like, but for a while I had to kind of swallow my stuff because I had to focus.
Fair. We are adults.
Right.
The urgency of our children sometimes does come first. It doesn't mean our needs don't exist. It means you first, because you're tiny and you have no other resources or options but what I give you. And then when I know you're stable enough and I can shift back focus onto me, then did you seek out your own therapist, or how did you manage? Okay.
Yeah, it did. It got to the point. So I remember there was one night with my oldest daughter, and it was like 3 a.m, and we had been up that whole time. She's still just going through everything and lots of emotion and lots of anger. My oldest daughter expressed through anger. She was just raging all the time.
Quite frankly, good for her.
Yes.
Hard for you. I could appreciate that.
She needed to.
But she has a right to be angry.
Absolutely. And that's actually something when I did start therapy, my therapist told me, I was like, I'm angry. I'm not angry at my daughters, of course. I'm angry at the situation. I'm angry that this happened. And that's what he said. He was like, it's called righteous anger. And you have to allow yourself to feel that. And that was kind of the turning point for me. I was like, you're right. Why am I swallowing all of this down? I'm hurting. They're hurting. We're hurting together. And so then it started to shift where we had moments of coming together where we would sit on the couch and just sob together. And I think that's important for your kids to see that you also have emotions.
Yeah.
And yes, you have these emotions, and we can cry and we can work through it. And then we can go outside and play together. And then we can go do a craft together, because that is part of healing too, is you don't want to sit in your mess forever. Right. And so I think that was a good example for them as well, to show them that I did move through it. And that's the important part. The healing is the important part of the story.
Yeah. And it is so validating. If they're still hurt, they're still angry, they're still sad. Yeah. And nobody else is. Everybody's moved on. There's this dissonance that happens that's very confusing. And the only real example I can give is after I lost my first pregnancy, I was very sad. And it was like 2 days, and everybody else was like, meh, get over it. And it's like, but my baby died. Like I held this tiny 12 and a half week baby in my hand, not alive. Like that is a very sad thing. I want to be sad. I want to honor the life that was ended way too soon.
Yeah.
And it was too much for most people, not everybody, but most people. And they wanted to just move on. And so this dissonance of like, hey, let's go get coffee. And I'm like, I'm sad. I don't want to be happy right now. I want to be sad and angry. And like, you're not over that yet? Like I literally had somebody say, like, you're not over that yet? I'm like, it's been 3 weeks. Are you over the death of your baby in 3 weeks? I don't think so. But it's hard for some people to understand, because they don't think of pregnancy in the same way that they maybe would, a 2-year-old, which is fair. It is different, but it is also a loss, and the person experiencing the loss gets to move through that at their pace.
Right. It's grief. It's part of the grief cycle. You have to go through the grief cycle. And there's lots of charts that like show the different emotions. And it's not linear. You could be the anger, you could be the denial, you could be the depression, you could be, it's all over the place. But that is part of the grief cycle. And if you don't allow yourself to go through the grief cycle, you never will.
Right.
And you'll just be stuck in that loop forever. So absolutely, you need to allow yourself to feel the emotions, and you need to validate, I had to validate my daughters and listen to them. And I believe you, and I hear you. And yes, I know you're hurting. And yes, I know you're confused and all of that. And I am too. And we're in this together, and we're figuring it out together.
And you're normalizing that it doesn't have to look one specific way. You don't have to just be over it. My sister-in-law was great during that period of time, because she would keep texting me periodically, just like, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, awful today. And she's like, you want to tell me about it? And she could hold the space for me to just be real, where like the majority of my life I kind of performed, and that's my own issue. But and so for your girls, they didn't have to perform. They could just be. They could play and laugh and jump and be joyful, and then also have moments where they were just sad, or other moments where they were angry, and like all of it was allowed. And I think that's another misconception about grief, is that, well, you can't laugh. How could you laugh? This terrible thing happened. Because we're alive. Part of life is happiness and joy and making those good memories too. We don't have to shut off any of that.
Yeah. And grief can turn into relief. Absolutely, it can, but it won't if you don't allow yourself to go through the whole grieving process. You have to allow yourself to get to that point where it's like, okay, this is starting to feel like relief now. This is starting to feel like we can breathe now. And I like to reference it a lot of times, like for myself and with my daughters, that it's like chapters in a book. Right. So yes, this happened. And yes, it was horrific. And I'm so sorry. And I feel for you. And yes, let's talk about it. Yes, I'm here to listen to you. Let's write the chapter out. Okay. But let's continue writing the book.
Mhm.
And yes, you can always come back and reference the chapter, and you can always come back and to that page, but you don't want to be reading that chapter over and over and over and over. Let's keep creating new chapters. Let's keep writing our book. And so for my husband and I, that was one of our really big goals through all of this, is to create new memories with our family. We have a blended family, so that's really important for us, but to create happy memories of when we went camping, or when we had a fun family movie night, or we jumped on the tramp with the sprinkler, just the little things of let's continue writing the story, and we can come back and reference these chapters when we need to. Absolutely. And then let's keep going. Let's keep.
And for those wondering, the reason why we do that is because our bodies naturally titrate. So it won't give us more than we can handle. So if we process level 1 and then we're like happy and safe, and it's like, okay, you're safe enough, here's level 2. And then we process that, and then we're like, okay, let's go like relax, do other things. Okay, here's level 3. And it's I visualize it like this spiral. And when the thing first happens down here, the spiral's real tight. It's like,
yes,
there's moments of joy and then a lot of grief, and that comes back around real quick. But as you continue, the spiral gets wider and wider, and the times that you have to revisit that grief are much you move through them much faster, and they're less frequently coming up, and it becomes a level of acceptance where you can talk about it and not get stuck. It is a thing that happened, like you said. I love that analogy. That's chapter 3. We're on chapter 7 now. And we know that chapter 3 happened.
Yeah. And it's okay to talk about it. If you need to talk about chapter 3, okay, let's talk about chapter 3. Now let's move on to chapter 7. Still give them that time and space that they need to talk about it. And that's something I actually learned when we were doing some of the group therapies with the Children's Justice Center, is they strongly suggest that you end it on a good note so that they're not stuck in that trauma, because it's already been so much trauma. We don't want to stay in the trauma.
So the way that I phrase that, because I can just hear people going, good, what the heck's good about this, is resolution. So when they're telling their story, you keep it going, you keep asking chronological questions, and then what happened, and then what was next. So what's happening is they have this huge emotion, and they're pairing it with logic, and that helps to integrate experiences. So they're, then this happened, and then this happened, and then what happened? And sometimes they'll get stuck, and you can prompt them, and then we called the police, and then what happened? Oh, then we talked to that nice lady, and then what happened? And then they took pictures, and the nurses came and asked you questions. And then what happened? Well, what do you mean? Well, then what happened next? I don't know. Well, then we went home. Oh yeah. And then we went home, and then we snuggled up in bed and we watched a movie. That's right. And so there's this resolution, because kids will get stuck at that like open-ended, like bad thing happened, and they forget that part of that is when you got to go home and snuggle, is when you went and had ice cream together. It is, and then mommy and do they call your husband dad yet?
They do now.
I thought so. I thought it was, then mom and dad got married, and in this beautiful forest wedding, and I got to wear princess dress. And they get to move through their story. Part of my story of my loss is that I then had 3 incredibly beautiful, amazing, healthy children. And that's part of the story. It doesn't just end with loss. It continues because we're still alive. So that ending on a good note or ending on a point of resolution, it just lets them come to the end. It lets them.
It's like the full circle. Circle of life. I said it's that full circle.
And it's so, you found incredible resources. I have to say, like, you really, kudos to Utah, because I don't think that I knew the layers of support that they had available to families.
That's
amazing.
There's a lot. And there's a lot of family therapists that specialize in victims of abuse. And there really are so many resources. And I sought out those resources because I didn't know.
Yeah.
And that's something it was kind of a hard pill for me to swallow, because for me personally, I've done a lot of personal development and other things like that. But there were a lot of things where I'm like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. I don't know what to do. And so what else is there? You go and seek out the authorities. You go and seek out the professionals that are trained in this, that know how to help.
And there's such wisdom in that choice to be, again, in reality. Like, the reality is I can't know everything. I've never done this specific thing before.
Right.
So let me find somebody who has.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they're authorities in the subject matter.
Yes.
You're the authority of your children. You know your children. So at some point, what you discovered is that therapy had lost its therapeutic benefit.
Yes.
So
yeah. So we did therapy. I mean, I have to look at dates, but it was a while. We did therapy for quite a while. But it feels like we kind of hit a plateau, I guess you could say. And it felt like we had just a lot of good in our life because we had worked through all of the grief and all of that and the anger and processed a lot of those emotions. So I just kind of recognized it got to a point where I was like, we're just repeating the story at this point. Nothing, no new allegations have come out, no new reports, anything like that. And it felt like they were just reliving the trauma over and over and over, repeating the same stories over and over. And so it got to a point where I was like, okay, I feel like we're at a good place right now where we can start to focus on the healing a little bit more. And so that's, it just was like, okay, I feel good. I feel good about the amount of work that we've done and the healing that we've done. Yeah. Let's keep living our life. Let's focus on creating those new memories, with also knowing that at some point it's going to start over again. Because as they grow up, once they hit their teen years, once they hit young adult, college, dating, getting married, having babies of their own, those are all different layers that they are going to have to heal. And right now we're at a point where they have healed the layer that makes sense to them at their age. But I know, and I can recognize that at some point it's going to start over again. And that's okay, because that's healing.
They'll have a new understanding of the world and of what exactly happened. And it will shift their perception from mean daddy to like, oh my God. Like, that moment will almost certainly happen as they mature and they look back at this experience, because they don't have that to apply yet, nor should they.
Right. And then we're going to be in that tight circle, tight spiral again. And just recognizing that that's going to happen. Yes. And because they have moved through that tight spiral, they will know as part of that, okay, I'm now on my healing journey again, and I'm reprocessing with this new layer of understanding and this new depth and possibly rage. Fair enough. And they know, and they can trust that they can get to acceptance. They can move through the grief process because they've done it before. Right. They know that they can seek out a therapist if they would like that kind of support. They know they can talk to their mom if they want that support. They know that they can rely on their community because they've already experienced in their body what it is to feel held and supported. Yeah. And that priming is so imperative for all of those layers of healing to come. Yeah. And it can become part of almost a familiarity, like, oh, that thing is coming up. I know what I would like to do with this. So you've not only have you armed them and protected them and given them so many wonderful tools for now, but you're giving them the foundation for all of these other possible things that could happen in their lifetime. Of when a bad thing happens, I know I need support. I know I need to feel all of my feelings. I know I need people that believe me. I know that I need to do the hard thing and face the reality and get, the proper authorities involved. I know that I need to make sure I'm taking care of myself. I know that I also need to allow myself to continue living and building good memories. Yeah. And what a beautiful blueprint that you have given these kids. Oh, thank you. Write a book. Working on it. Excellent. I love that so much. Yeah, absolutely. What are some of your favorite ways to make new memories? Oh, our favorite ways. Oh, there's so many things in a day. Like just recently, it's springtime. And so I bought jump ropes and bubbles for them yesterday. And we've been doing that all day. Like that's just been so many fun things. We just all really just finding joy in everyday moments. I don't think you don't even have to spend money. You don't have to plan a big vacation. It's just finding the joy in the everyday moments. It's telling knock jokes at dinner time. It's just those little things, because that's what kids remember. You know, they're not going to, I mean, yes, the jump ropes and stuff have been fun, but like, they're not going to remember that I bought them a pink jump rope, right? They're going to remember the time we spent together outside, and they hold on to those memories, not necessarily the things. So I think really the biggest part is just, I mean, at dinner time, we'll go around the table and we'll say, what was your favorite part of the day? What was your favorite thing that happened? And they're so cute. A lot of times they're like, oh, when daddy came home from work, or right now at dinner, you know? So like, it's good to see that they can also find joy in the little moments, because that's something that's going to be carried into adulthood. There's a lot of adults that struggle with finding joy in everyday moments. They had a bad morning, and then the rest of the week is just terrible. So yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing for us is we do fun things. We will plan little activities and things like that, but it's just the day-to-day happiness.
And I think that's a really important distinction, because I know that some families, they feel so much guilt that they want to like really overcompensate. And it's like, oh, this bad thing happened. Well, let's go to Disneyland. It's fine if you want to go to Disneyland, right, but Disneyland is not going to erase the bad thing. Exactly. Don't make that the goal, right? Right. Finding that life, normal life, has beauty and joy in it, and it continues. It goes on. Yeah. And, you know, I'm totally with you. My daughter does the same types of funny little like knock jokes, and she'll go, guess what? And I'm like, what? She goes, chicken butt. Yeah. And it's her favorite thing. They're so funny. And it's so silly. And I'm like, I don't know if you'll even remember this. She's 4, but man, I will. Like, it is the cutest thing. And I remember, you know, my middle, I would used to say, I love you. And he'd go, I love you too. And he would do this funny little like chirp. And, you know, it was just so cute. And those are the things that I cherish. I can't remember what toys we played with outside, but we played outside together. You know, we did the things. I think that energy of connection and vitality and peace and joy, and I have the power to find good in my day. Mm-hmm. All of that, I think, is so much more important than any one specific particular.
Absolutely. So. It is. It's a choice. It really is a choice to stay in the trauma forever, or to find the joy where there is joy, because you can be both. You can be both. You can be healing from the trauma, and you can have CPTSD, and you can be experiencing the grief and all these heavy, deep emotions. And also you can be happy, and you can laugh, and you really can be both. You can. It's not an either or thing.
I completely agree. It's amazing. Yeah. There is a book for any adults, definitely an adult book, but any adults who want to read about that exact topic. There's a book called The Choice by she has 3 names that start with E, and they all kind of sound like first names. I think it's Edith, Eva, Egger, I think is the order. So it's either Edith or Edith Eva, but I think it's Edith first. But it's called The Choice, and she survived the Holocaust. And she survived a lot of things in her life, and she has like those stories, but then she also has some really incredible stories from other people that she ended up encountering in her long life. And some of them will make you cry, some of them will make you cheer. But it is so inspiring, and it is exactly that, like that you have the choice when horrible, awful things, you know, unfair, fine, it's unfair, it shouldn't have happened. And
absolutely,
at the same time, the reality is that it did. And so with that fact in place, because we can't change it no matter how much we wish that we could, and it's totally fair to wish that we could.
Yeah.
What else do we have power over now? Where is our control now? And it could be in something as simple as a pillow fight, you know, or being able to go and yesterday we went on a long walk, kind of. So we went on a short walk first, but then the 2 younger kids just wanted to be at the park. So I left my husband with them at the park. And then my oldest was like very desperate to keep going. He was like, I'm so bored. And I was like, okay. So I went with him and we wandered all over, and you know, it's a simple thing. It's not complicated. It's free. It didn't even take that much time. but it was so important and so meaningful to him to
Mm-hmm.
feel like he mattered and he had some, autonomy in his world, and his people valued his needs and perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you have your focus on that in your parenting, there's going to be opportunities that just present themselves. It's not something you have to like sit there and rack your brain to come up with the right thing to do. Be open. Your kids will show you.
Yeah. And that comes kind of back to the conversation of being present with your kids and actively listening. And I mean, with reels and all the things, we all love that dopamine hit that we get as we're scrolling through social media, but that's important to them, is to give them your full attention and to have that focus with them. And maybe you do create moments where you busy parent, like I get that. I mean, my husband works from home, which is great, but he's working, he's busy, so it's just finding that time before bed, in the morning time, whenever you can, to have those 100% focused on them moments. And that's when the fun happens too. That's when those memories are created. That's what they're going to remember. Of course they're going to remember the what happened to them, but there's not going to be like, I don't want to say, it's not like a horrific end of my life. It's gonna be like, this happened to me when I was a child, and it was horrible. It was horrible. No child should ever have to endure what my daughters have endured.
Agreed.
But it's such a powerful piece of their story as well, to see them now. And to see the light. And that was a big thing too, as we've gone through this healing journey. I noticed their eyes. They had this dull eyes, and they have, I mean, you can't really tell, but I have bright blue eyes. They both have bright blue eyes. And to see the light come back in their eyes, that was huge. That was huge. And it was, yes, we had the therapy, and yes, we were doing all the things, but it was in those moments where they were laughing and where I could see their eyes lighting up. That's when I was able to take a breath and be like, it's all going to be okay.
We're moving in the right direction.
And it's going to be okay.
Yeah. That's incredible, Alishia.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
It's hard to even like do the interview and not tear up because I'm a highly emotional person, but it is such an incredible, inspirational story and experience. Taylor says it is Edith Eva Eager. And she also says kids may never remember what happened, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting point too, about how our bodies and our brains work. Is our brain may shut off and like black out even in the moment of the trauma, but our bodies remember the trauma. And that's why it's important to learn emotional intelligence and how we feel in our bodies, not necessarily what we think, but what we feel in our bodies. And that could be like the heavy emotions, but that can also be the uplifting light emotions as well. So being able to teach your kids, I mean, as adults, we're still learning emotional intelligence a lot ourselves, but that is a big part of it too. It's the feeling in your body, is how it felt when it happened and how it feels when we talk about it. And again, how does it feel to be happy? How does it feel to have these joyful, fun experiences as well? Absolutely. And just family memories, just fun, normal family memories.
I love it. Taylor says, thank you for sharing your story. So from this space, you have really done a lot of work in helping other people too. So obviously you're a massage therapist, so there's like the physical body work component, but there's also like an energy piece that you've really been tapping into. And I personally love to see your posts and see you talk about. You want to just share a tiny bit about that?
Yeah, so I've also dove into sound healing with different frequencies, because our bodies, we have an energetic field around us from our heart, and aura is what a lot of people recognize it as. And there's so many studies out there that you can Google online where our heart is what projects our aura, and we meet other people's hearts before, and it's the different frequencies that everybody puts off, and different emotions have different frequencies as well. So what's really cool about the sound healing, and I've used it a lot for our family situation too, and I have done it for group settings for other people as well, is that even though you don't have to necessarily experience the emotion again, you don't have to go into that deep sobbing grief. If you find the right frequency that can help heal it, just being surrounded in those healing frequencies can help relieve the heavy emotions. So sound healing has been a big part of it, because therapy helps for sure, but talk therapy, you're just talking about it the whole time. And that can be kind of like that repetitive thing we talked about. So finding different routes of healing has absolutely been essential. And nutrition's been a huge part of it as well. Figuring out different like magnesium and things like that help with emotions. So there's so many different avenues, so many different ways to get yourself help and to help your kids.
Yeah. And there's so many different modalities out there. And you'll find what resonates with you, and maybe it doesn't resonate with somebody else, but if it works for you, then yay.
Yeah.
You got something that works for you.
Yeah.
Sound baths, I've only done one. It was very interesting. It is wild, like how the notes just like hang in the air, like all around. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah. It helps your body get into that deep meditative state so that you can shut off the parts of your brain that are the trauma parts. We're writing those pathways all the time. And for adults, a lot of us are pathways that created in childhood trauma. And so when you're in a sound therapy session, it helps recreate new neural pathways of healing. And that's what our brain needs, is to create those new pathways so that we stop writing the trauma pathways. And that's what sound healing does. Essentially, there's a lot of science to it as well, but it helps create new neural pathways of healing so that we can experience the joy and the healed pathways more.
That's amazing. So if our listeners want to find you, what's the best way to do that?
I'm pretty active on social media. I've shared some information on my Facebook and Instagram pages. That's usually where I post where I'm doing sound healing in the future, things like that. So I would say social media is probably the best way to stay in touch and see about the different things and follow our journey. And then eventually one day the book. Writing a book is a process.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll put the link for your main profile.
Yes.
Okay. And then your Instagram. We'll put those links in the comments. And you can follow Alishia and her incredible story and her beautiful family. And we'll have you back on to have a totally different conversation on blending families. So
part 2 with my husband. We'll talk a little bit more about blended families and how that journey has been for the 2 of us. So
awesome. Because it's been different. You guys play different roles.
It is, absolutely.
So I look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Amazing, and you are such an inspiration. And I'm just really glad that those girls have you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we've come a long way, and I'm very grateful for all of it, really. So thank you so much.
All right, you guys have an awesome rest of your weekend, and we will see you next time. Bye.